With costs rising, demand fluctuating, inflation not going down, but in fact trending up since last summer, will the economy have a hard landing, soft landing, or no landing? I mean, how do we, as business owners and entrepreneurs, navigate these churning economic waters? I mean, how do we set pricing that's competitive, profitable, but doesn't leave money on the table? In this podcast, we will answer these questions and offer some simple ideas that can help you immensely.
Welcome to the Get Business Savvy podcast. I'm George Black, and I've helped lead 19 companies to over $1 billion in combined revenue.
And I'm AJ Bishop, a starting entrepreneur.
It feels like we've been hearing about this soft landing for a very long time now, and I've been preparing for such, but it doesn't seem like the landing has come yet, and I still haven't even felt the economic pressure ease at all, so I'm questioning, how hard are we falling? Is it going to be a soft landing? Is it going to be a hard landing? Or are we just going to completely bottom out? And what can we start doing about it, given the fact that there's so much uncertainty at the moment?
So, AJ, and guys, listen, there's a new development that you're not going to hear in the press right now. And it's happening in the options market. And I'm not going to bother to explain options today, but just know this. These guys bet, and they bet on things. And so the bets that they're placing through options is for a hard landing. And a hard landing means GDP is going to go down. Okay. So the economy is going to slow down. All right. That's a hard landing. And how do we know that's where they're placing their bets? They're betting that interest rates will go down, because if you have the GDP going down, they're going to have to stimulate the economy with lower interest rates. And so so right now, think of the options market like this. It's like FanDuel, okay? FanDuel, you go to FanDuel and they set odds on a team whether they're going to win or not, okay? This is really like the odds makers saying, and now the odds have gone up to 50-50. So it's like flip a coin. Is it going to be a hard landing or soft landing? I don't think we're going to have a no landing. So no landing would mean there's no problem, there's no anything. A soft landing is a gentle decline, and then we start accelerating back up. So it's 50-50, AJ. That's the answer to your question. And by the way, these aren't news people. These are people investing money, their hard dollars, into real instruments, and they could lose on this bet, okay?
These are people who eat, sleep, and breathe the market every day of their life and are trying to just beat it. And that's the game that they play.
So, right, we don't know if interest rates are going to go up, go down. We don't know if it's going to be hard, soft, none, landing. We don't know. But here's what I think you can know for 2024. It's going to be choppy, which means it's going to be rough sailing. It's not smooth sailing. And it's choppy economic waters. It's going to be wind blowing against you. There are going to be some economic headwinds against you. And what we want to know is and figure out, how can we be profitable in this kind of environment, stay competitive, and not lose business?
And how do you make money in those choppy waters? We touched on this briefly last week, but I know it's got to come down to how you're pricing yourself. But don't most companies price based off of their costs and then just adjust a little bit from there to try to make their profit?
So, yeah, AJ, I think you're right. I think a lot of companies just look at their costs and then they mark their prices up, okay? And that's very logical, but there's a lot of flaws in that, especially in choppy economic waters. If things are calm, that's going to work pretty good for you, but it goes back to, you've got to understand your numbers.
So last week we started with the gross profit numbers, that's dollar and percent, and then
Right.
you use that to go into an inflation calculator to make an apples to apples comparison of what you did this year on an inflation adjusted basis compared to what you've done in previous years on an inflation adjusted basis. So basically we said you need to evaluate yourself based on the inflation adjusted dollars.
Yeah. So you got to, guys, if you didn't hear last week, go check it out, because you've got to get the understanding of, first of all, your numbers. And And what we're talking about is comparing year over year. If you can go back 5 years, that's great. If you don't have that much data, then whatever you've got. But you want to do it as an inflation adjusted dollar amount, because that gives you what AJ was just saying, an apples to apples comparison. So I'm going to assume, let's just assume you've got that understanding, okay? And that's the gist of it right there. In the last 3 years, the overall US inflation rate has averaged 5.4%. And my hunch is you've probably seen a decline in your gross profit dollars and maybe gross profit percent when you compare inflation adjusted dollars. The other thing to consider here is when I say 5.4%, that is just a number that's slapped across everything. Okay. So depending on your region, depending on the materials you have to buy or the labor you have to pay for, your number more than likely is higher than that number. Okay. It's probably not lower, but it could be in some rare instances. So the first thing you have to do is look at yourself. And what we're saying is compare yourself to yourself and see where you are, because more than likely over the last 3 to 5 years, you've lost ground and don't even know it.
Yeah, so we understand you have to compare your gross profit on an inflation adjusted basis to see how you're actually doing. But once you do that, how does that help you navigate these choppy waters? Like, okay, I understand now I'm making less money than I was making 5 years ago on an inflation adjusted basis, but the choppy waters ahead of me, how do I increase that given the fact that the environment's not so conducive to that?
Right. So it goes back to just those basic Eco 101 principles. And this is a hilarious story. I remember when I was in Eco 101, and I'll never forget. And, it's one of those classes where, there's like 200 students or 300 students. It's huge, right? Because it's all the freshmen. And so the prof we had was spectacular and very, very funny. And Professor Hansen, I remember his name. Amazing. So everyone's leaving, and as we leave, it's kind of like all the students go up the aisles and out, and there's one guy still sitting at his desk at their long tables, and he's sitting there and he's asleep. And so there's 100 of us standing in the back of the room, and we go, Professor Hansen, and we're all pointing at this guy. And so Professor Hansen goes up to the guy. I mean, he's like, midway up, and he goes up to the guy and he starts whispering, supply, demand, supply, demand, supply. And he's getting louder and louder. And the guy wakes up, and it's like one of those Charlie Brown things where all the kids in the back of the room are laughing. Ha 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 ha. He was so embarrassed. But the point of my story is it's supply and demand. And now you're not going to forget it because you're going to remember the kid that Professor Hansen woke up at the end of his class. And I bet that kid never fell asleep again his entire life in a classroom. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see we have a graph up. And for those listening, I'm just going to describe it. It's not too terribly complicated. So imagine a line going straight up, and that's price, okay? And then a line going straight horizontal, okay? So they meet at a right angle, and that's quantity, all right? And so then you have one line that moves from the bottom corner where the two lines intersect to the upper right, and that's supply. And then from the top of the price line to the end of the quantity line, you have demand. So they make an X, all right? At the point of the X is the price. So let me explain how this is working. So as you go out, you get more supply, all right? The more supply you have, then you're meeting demand. So demand comes down because you're satisfying more people. So the price goes down the vertical line. Okay. If you have less of that item, then the quantity is going to go back to the left. And so supply drops, demand goes up, and price goes up. It doesn't matter what's going on. People, whether it's inflation or not inflation, supply demand is the way it works. And we're going to use this graph to make you some money. Okay. I'll show you how this works. We're going to start with the costs because they're a bit more straightforward. In times like these, and kind of you should do this anyhow, but particularly in times like these, you just need to shop the hell out of all of your significant costs in your business.
Yeah, and I completely agree with the shopping the costs out, because I think a lot of times in these inflationary environments, there's companies who try to take advantage of it, and they know people are expecting more inflation. They know their customers just keep coming back on a recurring basis. So they just bump the price up a little bit more than inflation to try to sneak out extra profit above what the market otherwise would allow them to. But by shopping that, you're able to figure out, oh, they're gouging me on that price. This good is actually it hasn't inflated as much as they say it is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you expose all kinds of things. And I'll just give you an example. Like I just noticed literally today, and this is a commodity. Okay. So it's gasoline. All right. So it's not exactly, no, if you do deliveries and transportation, this matters. Okay. Literally, there are two gas stations next to each other, and there's a 35-cent spread right now. Now, that's not going to stay there very long. Okay. Because what's going to happen is the high price guy is going to drop to the low price guy. I guarantee you it. And you see this all the time, but I'm using that as an illustration. So yeah, you may gouge a few and get some extra money or whatever, but you've done two things. You've damaged your reputation in the marketplace because everyone now knows, oh, you're the high price guy. And there's no difference. I mean, unleaded gas is unleaded gas. All right. We're just not. So it's a super simple analogy that I'm giving you in real time thing. But it's a little trickier. So if like you've got if you've got materials you're buying to make products, for example, then you can look at your raw material costs and maybe shop that. Okay. You may have other items that are significant expenses that you should go out and shop. Things like rent. Now there's a cost to move, so you've got to build that into your cost differential. But insurance, benefits, those are all other kinds of costs that could be in your expenses that are fairly significant. So that's why I'm using the word significant. You don't want to go shop stuff that isn't going to move the needle. You want stuff that's going to move your needle and create some profitability for you. There's another aspect. So there's two aspects to the gross profit cost. There's also labor. It's hard to know what's happening on the labor front. It's certainly been tight labor market, which means higher wages. Okay. That's supply demand, guys. It's classic. So there's less quantity of people available to hire. So the price goes up because demand didn't stop. There's still demand for lots of workers, okay? But now we're starting to hear lots of layoffs. So more people are maybe coming into the labor market, which now there's more supply. Well, wages are going to come down to get the guys you want. Do you see how this is working? So what you want to do is, I don't mean go lay off your staff or anything like that, but it's like if you're hiring, you want to hire smartly. And you've got to look at all these costs. So that's why, first of all, you got to understand your numbers so you know what's going into them. And then where can you get in on these costs and squeeze whatever you can out of the cost? Because in choppy markets, there's opportunities, but it's high volatility. Like I'm just saying, one gas station may be charging 50 cents more than another one. But if you don't look at the signage and you don't look at the market and you don't see what's going on, you may pay the higher price and never even know it.
How practical is that really, George? Because let's say you hired somebody 2 years ago for $60,000, but now the market rate for that position is only $50,000.
Right.
Is it really worth doing the whole layoff cost, whatever package you owe them, then offboarding them and then onboarding the new person onto the team and taking the risk that they're not the right fit, even though the last person was there for 2 years? Like, how practical can that really be? How much can you save on labor just with the market dynamics.
Yeah, that's not practical at all to do what you just described, because if it's a non-productive worker, well, you just do that. You get rid of them, But if they're a good employee, it's worth the premium, and the cost to hire another person and retrain them and all of that far exceed the $10,000 savings. What I'm actually talking about is, like, if you're hiring or you're bringing in people, that's where you want to shop it hard. Okay. Not with your existing people.
So that would be like, let's say that person who you hired for $60,000, they're leaving the company. So now when you post that job posting, you should price the salary to the market rate for that $50,000.
Correct.
When the position's open, you should be putting the salary and you should be paying according to the market, rather than trying to just cut every labor cost down to the market rate, because that's not going to be practical.
Right. So currently you have large companies doing RIFs, reduction in force, of thousands, tens of thousands of people. You can see it in the business news every day. All right. So one way to cut costs is what happens in good times is you hire all these people, and then things slow down and you got to adjust your workforce. So that's one solution. Okay. But I think there's another solution. I think you can get smart with stuff. And I think you can use choppy waters to do some really ingenious stuff. I want to reference you guys to go back into our podcast archives and look in November at the interview we did with Mike Westman of Tom's Keys, because Mike shares how he offshores a lot of labor to do different things. And he shares how he's incorporated those people from the Philippines, Central America, things like that, into their main operation, I think in Utah, as part of the team. And they've even done an offsite in the Philippines where they brought everybody together. And a lot of companies are doing this because the jobs can be done from offshore. So this is jobs that have that ability, and it's at a much lower cost. And the same thing applies to materials. A friend was just telling me in their little business, they wanted to print a very handsome looking spiral book type thing. And it was going to cost in America like $30 to do this thing. And they shopped it worldwide and found a group in India that did it at a price because they wanted to sell it for $30, not pay $30 to have it done. And so they found a group, and it took a while. He said it was hard to find this, but found a group in India, and you have to make all these decisions, which I didn't even think about, like paper quality and all this stuff. And they did it, and they've got it, and now they're selling them. And so I think you've got to so what happens in choppy times and downturns is companies get super clever, super creative on how to make things work while maintaining your gross profit.
So it's almost like these choppy waters, you can look at them almost in a positive light, in the sense that this is going to force me to get smart. This is going to force me to get efficient. This is going to force me to make my company operate as optimally as it can, because otherwise it's not going to survive.
So there's a little caveat on that. If you understand your numbers, everything you just said works. Okay. But if you're not understanding and watching your numbers, these choppy waters take your profits down. You don't even know it until it's basically the boat's taking water on, and you're like, hey, how come my feet are wet? Well, it's because you're not making money anymore. It's going under. And so you can turn it around, but let me tell you something, guys. It is much better to never be in that position. If you're looking at, and I'll just pick a number, a 40% gross profit number, okay, and you want to maintain a gross margin of 40%, and it's dropping 39, 38, 37, catch it right there, because you're still going to be profitable. And you can start figuring out where can we make adjustments, because it's a lot easier to adjust a few percentages than when you realize, oh, my gross margins have dropped 15%. That's a lot of problem right there.
And I remember when I was in Eco 101 not that long ago, we were taught there's two sides of this equation we're talking about here. There's costs, and then there's also the pricing side of things that you have to focus on for your business. And how do we start to approach that with these choppy waters?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this in a way you're not expecting. And they don't teach this in Eco 101. And by the way, Eco 101 hasn't changed, AJ, in all these years. All right. I'm just saying it's the same thing. All right. So you need to get a deep understanding of who your primary competitors are. And so how do your services and how do your products compare? Because they're not going to be the same thing. We've been saying this apples to apples thing. Okay. It isn't going to be the same thing. It's going to be similar, but different. And you've got to consider your region, or maybe you've got a national market, a regional market. You could even have a global market. Okay. How do you compare out? And you want to know primary competitors to you. All right. And so there might be Globo Corp. Well, okay, fine. I'm Microcorp. Okay. And I'm not going to be competing with Globo. All right. I'm just not. So that's okay. So who are the guys you're trying to knock out and get ahead of? And you've got to get good with your value story, because your value story supports your price. And if you tell a good value story, higher price. If you don't do a good job presenting your value, then you're scrambling to just be this price to price, like the gas stations. Okay.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking about this as I played sports my whole life, and it's just like when you want to compete against a team, you need to understand everything that they're going to do against you. And then also you want to understand all of your strengths and how they match up against everything that other side has. And it's the same thing with businesses. You want to understand what you're competing against, and then what are your strengths?
Yeah. So AJ, how did your team understand what other teams were doing? Scouts. You sent scouts. You watched game film. You had people go to their games. That sort of thing.
Whatever stats you could find on the internet.
You know what we used to do in the retail business? Because we had a furniture store, regional area. We would competitively shop. We would hire people who would anonymously go in and shop the store, and we sent them in with they knew what they were looking for and what we wanted to know. Shop the competition, because guess what? If they're good, they're doing the same thing to us, and I want them to, because I want them to be afraid of me, because I've got such great value. And we were like the premier furniture store in the region.
And you can get to that position where they fear you because they know you're attacking their weaknesses, because you've identified their weaknesses properly, because you've gone out and done the scouting. So now you know how to attack them, and they didn't do the scouting on you. So you're attacking an opponent who doesn't know how to attack you back.
Yeah. This is making me think. I think where you should start scouting is yourself first.
Yes.
And here's why. So this literally just happened with companies I'm an entrepreneur guide for, and I uncovered huge value. So let me describe this. He's an ER doc, and he does live events, training events for nurse practitioners and physician assistants. And I'm going to give him a plug. Okay. His name's Rob, and go to ppemedical.com and sign up for one of his live events. They're awesome. And I'm going to tell you why. So these are 2-day and 3-day live events. And they price at $18.95. That's competitive. And you get a certain amount of CME credits and all this kind of stuff. But what you get more than anybody else is the hands-on training. You get interaction with, it's led by doctors. And so you're learning how the doctors think. You're taught leadership skills. It boosts your confidence. It's huge. It's amazing. Okay. And we know all that value. And so over the last year, I've gotten that value story out. And then just like a week ago, I discovered there's even more value. It's like those ads, and there's more. Well, Rob is so understated. And what I discovered was he's going like, oh yeah, no, I give them, if you buy the class, you also get all the videos in our course, because you can take this course online. You get all those videos too. I go, for free? He goes, oh yeah, I just give it to him. And I go, well, what else do you give him? He goes, oh, I give him this thing called the toolkit. I go, what's that? And he goes, well, and it is a gigantic database of all this information that these nurse practitioners and PAs can use to solve problems. And it's free. And I go, well, what's the value of this stuff? It's literally $500. And I said, well, Rob, we got to tell a story. Nobody knows about it. Now, he's had some technical issues, but those are getting solved very, very fast. And like some slow load times on websites and stuff like that. But that's minor stuff. We should have been telling this value story. So anyhow, it's okay. We found it and it's there. It's $500. So in other words, we could add $500 to the price, $24.95. Say, we're going to give you this stuff for free. We're knocking $500 off the price. It's $18.95. And it's all true. And nobody in his space can compete against that, because he's selling a premium service and he's delivering a premium service.
And it starts with that self-scout. What are we doing that's really good? What do people really enjoy about us? What do we do that other people can't do? What is unique about us? Why do people leave our live events or our facility, or why are our customers happy with us and keep coming back?
What happens in choppy waters is we start getting a mentality. You just get the crap beat out of you, honestly, in the marketplace. And you think the only answer to more business is just to cut my prices. But there's a place you got to stop. And it's like, you can't cut anymore. And so, but the problem isn't price. Most people don't buy just on price. They buy on the what.
Yeah.
What is the value of this? What am I getting? So you have to tell it in a way, not what you do. You've got to tell them what you get. Yeah, I'm starting to swerve into some pricing strategy and a whole bunch of stuff here. I can feel it coming on.
I was just about to say, an insight I'm pulling from that is you're not selling a price. You're selling the value you have, and that has a price associated with it. No one buys anything just because it's a price. Oh, that's a good price. They shop for value.
Think about it that way. What are the results they get from your service? And when you go and scout the competition, that's what you're really looking for. What you're looking for are what are the results they deliver versus the results you deliver. And you may find that you're below them. They're better than you. Oops. What do we got to do? So this is going to cause a big rethink. You may find you deliver way more than they do, but you charge less than they do. You're going to find out amazing stuff. And look, I know everyone's situation is different. We're trying to speak to that generality, but I'm imagining most of you guys would probably like to get more specifics on your business and ask some questions to me. And what would I think about that? Well, I've got good news. You can come to our next Exponential Growth webinar. It's free, where you can ask me those questions you want to ask, and I'll answer them. For all the details, just go to getbusinesssavvy.com or click the link down below. And if you haven't seen last week's episode, you absolutely must watch it. It's on operating your business in a hot inflation economy. And until next time, may you live truly free.